What's up, everybody? Thanks for joining me on D's analysis. We're going to be looking at MSTR, Bitcoin, going over some different charts and indicators. If you guys enjoy content like this, make sure you guys like the video and be sure to subscribe if you enjoy the content. So let's get straight into it. MSTR is still looking good. Nothing really has changed. We haven't really moved much. Very low volume. Right now, we still are holding our breakout right now at the moment. We had our breakout on the weekly of this long-term established downward sloping trend line. Still holding it. Ideally, we want to close 414 or 430 or at least above this golden zone. But at the minimum, we want to close above this wick. The only way that we could get something like that is, of course, if we get some kind of nice move on Bitcoin. But of course, we know how that's been going. Bitcoin's kind of just been faking us out, pushing up, and just getting rejected at the top of its zone, which I'll go over later in the video. So make sure you guys stay tuned for that. I don't think anything's really changed. I think Bitcoin is waiting for that narrative to finally break out. And of course, when that happens, MSTR will more than likely begin to run. It does feel like Bitcoin is ready to make that move relatively soon. But of course, we have no clue when that will happen. It could get pushed out further. We could get a dip before we actually break out, but we have been hanging around the top of the range. And here on MSTR, it looks like we already got our bounce off of this bottom trend line, but who knows, because we could always continuously chop sideways until we come into contact again, and then maybe that's the actual move. But hopefully this was the actual move there. As we talked about before, when you look here on the fib, looks like we got to bounce off the 382, which is a key level for a continuation to the upside. And we have been holding above the 236, so it is looking really good right now. We just have to break out of this golden zone and break above this zone right here. But of course, we're still just waiting on Bitcoin overall. And honestly, we aren't really, most people will say they're going to talk about this being the local high. But in all reality, in just like price action, this is irrelevant because this just happened because of FOMO last second. Things just absolutely skyrocketed and then it fell right off like that same day. So in all reality, the real top for MSTR is around this region right there. Everything above that is kind of irrelevant because you can see that we did find key level of resistance here. So we touched that level a couple of times. So that's actually the real level that we need to break, which is around that 440, 450 region. So I really think that's the key level that we have to get above. And we're currently, if we were to measure it, we're down about 10% from the all-time highs, as Bitcoin's down like 2.5% to 3% from its all-time highs. So I do think we could get a little move above that and off to the races from there. Maybe we chop here at the midline. Of course, we'll see. And that, speaking of the middle of the channel, that has been a key level that we will have to be watching for. And we have to see if we find some kind of resistance there. So especially on the Bitcoin chart, but you can see it here that it was acting as support and resistance along the way. So let's see what happens when we touch it. If we touch it and get rejected, or if we can actually touch it and break through and act as support to continue the move to that upwards target that we've been talking about for the golden zone. Also, when you look at the pullbacks that we've had after the moves to the upside, you can see we pull back to around the 0.5 to the 618 region, somewhere in this area. And you can see it happened here as well. And of course, remember, that's pulling it all the way to the top. So that's the exaggerated move. But if you eliminate that and you put it to that region that I said, which is around that 450 target, you can see that we bounced off the 0.618. It's kind of the same area that we saw this last move as well. So if we were to see a repeat of this move, and let's say we made it up to around 950 or maybe $1,000 or something like that, somewhere at the top of this channel, we'll see, of course. Nothing's guaranteed. But if we were to make a move up there and we were to pull back to the 0.5 that would be around 620. If we pulled back to the 618, that'd be the 534 region. So, and that would actually coincide with the bottom of this trend line as well, depending on when it happens. And of course, if we actually do make a move to the top and the cycle's over, we could chop here like we're gonna move up and then actually fall through to end the cycle. And then we rinse and repeat, you know, the whole move that we've seen through this last cycle, all the way from, you know, January 2023 and 2022 throughout. And that would be 2022 would pretty much line up with 2026. So we are expecting some kind of price action like this going into 26, 27, maybe early 27, but mid to late 26. I would imagine we're going to see some kind of downward action. Unless cycles are over. If cycles are over for Bitcoin, then maybe not. But I don't think they're over yet. I don't think we've gotten to that point yet. But at some point, I think they will end. But for now, I think it's still going to be the same thing that we've been seeing for the past couple cycles. But anyways, long term, if you believe in Bitcoin and you believe in what the strategy that Microstrategy has going on for MSTR and Strike and Strife, all those preferred stock, if you believe in that concept and what he's trying to do to accumulate more Bitcoin, increase the Bitcoin yield, if you think that's a great idea, then you should probably continue to DCA into MSTR. You don't even have to sell off this year. You don't have to. You can trim off a little bit if you feel like we're getting overheated. So just at least hold on to some profits, and then you can reaccumulate in the downturn. But you don't have to sell your entire stack. Maybe you can sell 25% if you feel comfortable with that. Of course, there's no right or wrong answer. Everybody's situation is different. But if you dollar cost average throughout this year and through the next 3 to 4 years for the next cycle, then you might be okay. Not financial advice, of course. But that, along with Bitcoin, you stack those up together. If you're, more of a crypto-related kind of person, I think you should be more than okay. And I just can't help but be bullish on Bitcoin when you look at the price action. I mean, this is looking good. We got to pull back. When you look at the golden zone from this key level here, pulled back to the 382, which is a key level to continue the move to the upside. We pushed back strong through the 236. We closed this week very, very strong, very bullish. Then we retested and shot right back up and closed outside of this downward sloping trend line. We have a retest right now. We aren't even falling underneath 107.4 at the moment. Who knows? Like, after this video comes out, this thing could end up dropping really quick. We never know. But like I said, we're holding it well. We just broke out of this downward sloping trend line. It just looks so bullish. We got our highest weekly close ever at 109.145. It's hard not to be bullish, But if we were to get that close above this region here, then we're touching all-time highs at 112. And I think once we break 112, then we touch this top of this trend line here. And then, of course, from there, it goes into price discovery. And then maybe we chop once we meet that midline of this channel, which is pretty much the same thing that we saw in MSTR. And that is around this region here, which lines up pretty perfect with past support and resistance. And it's been acting as resistance this entire time. We haven't been able to break it. So it's been nothing but resistance. We've had 1, 2, 3, 4 touches. We didn't even get close enough to touch there. So let's see when we actually make contact with it, what happens. So if it were to happen, next month, we're looking at potentially 130 if we hit that midline. If it were to happen this month, maybe 127. But then again, you have to take an account for like wicks. Like for instance here, you can see it was at 100, right? That's where the line was, but the wick went all the way up to practically 108, 109. So, and the same thing here, It was at 103 and it wicked up to like 110. So I would imagine if we did touch that 126, 127 region, maybe we wick up to 130, then we find rejection before chopping a little bit and then maybe continuing the move, or maybe the cycle's over. Who knows? But it's just very hard not to be bullish. And on the monthly too, we also had our highest monthly close at 107.1. So being bearish right now, it's kind of hard to even be bearish when you're just looking at the charts. Everything's screaming bullishness. You have all these companies accumulating Bitcoin, the ETFs. There's a lot of bullish sentiment. States are implementing Bitcoin strategic reserves, and there's just so much going on. So it's hard not to be bullish on the future. And then when you look at like the power law and stuff on Bitcoin and where it could be going in the future, it just looks like this is the right move to make. And not saying that you have to have 50 or 100% of your portfolio into Bitcoin, but definitely some kind of exposure. And if you don't really like volatility, then maybe you have a standard, stock or ETF portfolio, and then, sprinkle in some Bitcoin, maybe 3-5%, something light, but something that'll still make a difference, especially in the long term when this thing starts hitting, 500K, $1 million. And I'm talking, that's further in the future. I'm not talking anytime soon right now. It's a fixed supply. So fixed supply, you have a finite amount of Bitcoin. That's key. It's the complete opposite of the dollar. The dollar, they just print it on demand. And when you can print something on demand, it just loses value. The more you print it, the less valuable it becomes, because there's a higher supply. You have a low supply with high demand, that kind of ties in with the power law. So this thing should continue rising with time. But I could see a nice green candle forming here. It kind of makes sense for it to happen. We'll see, of course. Nothing has to play out. But every time we've seen breakouts on the monthly, you can see, we'll just measure these, a couple examples out here. You can see we measure this one. That's an 88% move. So we'll just say 90 for easy numbers, 90. This one was 200%. From this bottom, we'll just take it from this bottom here. So 90, 200, 100. So let's say we do the minimum. We'll say we do even less. Actually, no, let's say 90. So let's say we do 90. You're looking at 140. If we were to continue to follow this trend that we've seen, which is this leg, and this leg. So the past 3 legs. So the trend ever since January 2023, if we continue that trend on this move here, then we could be sitting at 140K based off of these 3 legs, if we were to continue the same, percentage gains. So it's very interesting. It's a weird time right now, because we're sitting at all-time highs, but people are like not really looking at Bitcoin right now, which is kind of weird, because usually when you're sitting at all-time highs, people are stoked about Bitcoin, but nobody's really here, like in terms of retail and like just people on YouTube just watching different videos and stuff. But of course, that's because the altcoins and meme coins aren't like popping right now. Once those start going crazy, that's when you'll get the random people that that have no clue about investing or crypto or stocks. That's when they'll start talking about it, and that's actually going to be a signal that the top could be in, once you see everybody piling in. But price action is looking pretty good, and I still think we could see higher targets. How high, I'm not too sure, but I do think we should find some kind of resistance at this midline here for this trend. Like I said, it's been acting as resistance multiple times, so we'll see what happens when we touch it again. We haven't had a monthly close above it since, all the way back here in 2022, as we were falling back down. But ever since 2022, we haven't had an actual durable close above that midline. So maybe if we do get a durable close above that, maybe that opens up a really aggressive move to the upside, because now maybe we start playing with the top of the channel instead of staying here at the bottom half of this channel. You guys let me know what you think in the comment section. What do you guys think? Where do you guys think this thing's going? Do you think we're going to find resistance at this upward sloping trend line? Do you think we're going to find resistance here at this midline? Or do you think they're irrelevant and you think we're going to hit something else? Do you think a fib level is more important? Like if we, I don't know, maybe you pull the fib from here. Maybe you think these levels are more important, like the 1618. Well, the 1618 actually lines up with the midline too, depending on when you touch it. Like if you were to hit it in August, it kind of lines up with the midline and the 1618. So who knows, maybe that's where we land. Let me know what you guys think. Do you think fib levels are more important? Do you think just your standard, trend lines are going to be important, the middle of the channel? And also make sure you guys like and subscribe on these videos. It really helps me out, helps the algorithm out, and I appreciate all your support. And when we look at the Tether Dominance, man, this thing it's just screaming that we're gonna have a freaking move to the downside. You see that bull flag there, or bear flag there, calling for a target much lower. It's just hugging this trend line very tight. So I feel like we're gonna get some kind of move to the downside pretty soon, which would be bullish for Bitcoin. I could just see us breaking down and honestly touching this key level right here and maybe chopping and then falling through, and then we get a nice rally off of Bitcoin. It looks very close to falling through. And when you actually look at the SMAs on the daily, you can actually see we're underneath the 200. The orange and green line here, we're underneath the 200, but we're still holding the 50. So that's a good sign for, I guess, Tether Dominance if you wanted it to go up. Not a good sign if you want Bitcoin to go up. But you can see the 50 is still underneath in confluence with this upward sloping trend line. But above you is the 20, which we found resistance off of multiple times. And the 20 is a lot weaker than the 200. And now we got that close underneath the 200. And now we're retesting. So this is going to be a lot of resistance right here. So let's see if we can break this trend line, this 50, retest. And I think that's going to open up the possibility for lower levels. Like it definitely increases the odds. I think our odds already have increased since we closed underneath the 200. Now, if we end up closing a daily back above the 200, then of course it changes. But once you close below the 200, it definitely increases your odds of having a larger move to the downside, which would be a spike for Bitcoin. You guys let me know what you think in the comment section about all of this. Like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.